Welcome to another edition of Ask GCN Anything. Without further ado, we're going to get right in with the questions with this over on Twitter from Ian M. Stewart, who asks, "Hey GCN, when I ride, even for an hour, my hands get numb. Is it my stem, my bars or my grip? I'm trying not to grip the bars too tightly. #talkback." Well, Ian, thank you very much for getting in touch. Now, pain, numbness and tingling in the fingers and hands is actually quite a common problem for cyclists, regardless of experience. In fact, I did have quite a bit of numbness in my hands over the weekend when I rode the King of the Mountains Challenge in Taiwan. So it is something that affects lots and lots of cyclists. Now, it's basically, from a medical perspective, called ulnar neuropathy, and it happens when the ulnar nerve, which runs from the root here right the way down through your arm, finishing in your little finger, it's when the ulnar nerve is compressed, generally by long periods of time, in one set position, so either on the tops or quite a lot in fact on the drops, when basically there's a pressure on this part of your hand. Now, it can cause tingling, as I mentioned before, often pain. This can be alleviated by regularly shifting your position on the handlebars. But if it becomes a particularly persistent problem, you need to start to look at what the root cause is. And we do that in this video.
Keeping this position on the bike whilst removing your hands from the bars. That way you're going to recruit more of your core muscles and your arms, hands and wrists are going to be bearing less weight. So you should look at things like the height of your bars and maybe the angle of the shifters, etc. as well. If they're too low, it might be you've just got too much weight going through your hands and wrists.
Next up, we have this question down in the comments section from Owen Jones. "Hey guys, I know you measure your saddle height from the centre of the bottom bracket to the top of the saddle, but this confuses me a little bit. Doesn't the length of the cranks or the rise from your shoes or cleats make a difference? Or is the calculation based on an average length or height for both, so it will need to be adjusted accordingly? Thanks for the consistently great content." Well, it's very kind, Owen. Thanks very much for getting in touch. Basically, you have answered your question there. You are right. You do need to adjust your saddle height incrementally, only very slightly, when changing saddles, for example, because if you've got a different shape of saddle, that can actually determine how high or low you sit on it. And one of the most fundamentally important things to double check on as well is the type of pedal system that you're using. So if you're moving from one pedal system to another, the stack height could be a couple of millimeters different, and the same can be said for different shoes as well. So what you need to draw out of this question basically, and what is fundamentally important, once you've got your ideal setup on your bike, is make a note of the exact distance. So measure your saddle height and keep it, and then basically you can adjust accordingly if you were to move on to a different bike, for example, or a higher bike, or you were to change saddles or pedal systems. Now, we do know, it's pretty common knowledge, isn't it, that getting your saddle height right is important for comfort, for efficiency, etc. But exactly how important is it? Well, me and Si went to a lab to ask that very question.
Because believe it or not, out of all the presenters, he's actually the most obsessive about his saddle height, which is ironic given that he spends so much of his time not even clipped in. One. Hey!
We're going to test two key parameters. Firstly, my seated maximal sprint power, and secondly, my ability to hold a specific sub-threshold power, whilst at the same time measuring my expired gases, my blood lactate, and also my heart rate.
Boop, 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 boop. It's time now for the rapid fire round. First up is this from Paul Holden. "How come you guys never seem to have covered titanium bikes? How about an in-depth titanium versus carbon feature?" That is a very, very good idea. We have actually written that one down now. Thanks very much for that. Walter Peters says, "Any hacks to prevent remnants of a gel leaking out of the packaging and spreading into your back pocket other than throwing them away?" Very, very good green question there, Walter. What I've done in the past is fold them up really, really tightly and then put them inside the little bag I've got with my inner tubes. Also, you could put them in the pack underneath your saddle, so in your saddle bag as well, and that way they won't leak into your pocket. Next up, we've got this from Ben Dolby. "I've got absolutely nothing against Lasty, but we need to see him suffer more." Thumbs up from me there, Ben. Great comment. Next up is this from Jack Larkin McHugh, who asks, "Please do an episode where all the GCN presenters get so much money to buy a bike, then they have to cycle a bike to a destination and do challenges with the bike." All I'm going to say is, watch this space. Next up, we have this for Edwin Chadwell. "What happens if the world champion also wins the European Championships? Obviously, the rainbows would take priority over the stars, but what happens to the European jersey?" Is it not worn, or is it worn by the second place rider, like when a jersey is owned by someone who owns another jersey in a tour? Sorry for the length. Yeah, thanks for the apology. That was a rather long and convoluted question, but basically the answer is Peter Sagan a couple of years ago was European and World Champion. He first wore the European Champion, but then, as you said, the World Champion's jersey trumps it. So if that happens in the future, basically, very sadly, that European's Champion jersey will be put in a drawer and nobody else can ride with it at all, which is a little bit sad. So no, second place, can't use it. This question now from Darren Whitford. It rained the other day on my ride. It doesn't happen very often in Australia. What can I do to keep the traction on my back wheel when climbing out of the saddle? Well, first up, you need to look at your tyre pressure. Make sure if you're going out in the rain that your tyres aren't too hard, but on a steep climb, what you need to do is redistribute your weight a little bit more over the back wheel. So rather than leaning forward, which you generally do on a steep climb, just push your arms back a little bit, put some of the body weight over the back wheel, and that should improve your traction. And finally, we have this rather long-winded question for the rapid fire round from Barnaby Grant. Deep breath. If you're having trouble with junctions at intersections for interval training, instead of trying to stick to a preset interval plan, but try using the junctions and roundabouts and stop signs as part of the interval training. This, by the way, is an answer to one of last week's question about stopping during interval training out on your bike. I have a 30k out and back route with a roundabout at least every kilometre, and I use the roundabouts as markers for my efforts. Between one pair, I'll sprint the next, then recover. The next might be a 10-second effort with 20-second recoveries or ramped up heart rate. Basically, that is a top hole suggestion for basically using your environment, your road furniture, your traffic for basically doing intervals with. Spot on, Barnaby. And that's it for the rapid fire round. Okay, time to just slow things down a little bit with this question from Daniel Adser down in the comment section. He asks, how do you use gears the right way? Because I normally use gears 11, 8, 7 and 1. Have you got any help, please, GCN? Well, Daniel, thanks very much for getting in contact. Now, many of you out there, I've no doubt, might think this is a pretty basic question. But for people who are new to the sport, this actually can take quite a long time to get your head around. Because when you think about it, if you've been riding for a few years and you start to break down everything that you know about cycling, it actually is pretty amazing because you absorb that information almost through a process of osmosis. So for somebody new to the sport, no question is a silly one, and generally speaking, we have a video for every single question that people ask. And Daniel, to answer your question directly, here's me explaining exactly how.
Firstly, on the right, the lever being swung inwards changes you to a bigger cog at the back, which actually makes it easier. Now on here, I've got electric gears, so I'm just using the paddles. Now on the left-hand side, when you swing the mechanical lever inwards or tap the electric paddle, it makes it, or turns it onto a bigger cog at the front or a chainring, which is actually harder.
And finally, on this week's Ask GCN Anything, we have this question down in the comment section from Euro Troppo, who asks, I've got a hell of a climb that I want to improve at. Therefore, I believe easier gears will help. Should I change the cassette or the smaller chainring? Hi Euro Troppo, thanks for getting in contact. Now, getting easier gears will certainly help you get over the steeper elements or the steeper parts of the slope far more effectively and efficiently. As we all know, if you're churning at a low cadence on a gear, it becomes inefficient, you start to recruit a lot of muscle groups, and it basically is very inefficient unless you are a particularly forceful and strong rider. So ideally on a climb, you need to have a gear that enables you to get on top of the gear and actually ride in a nice smooth rhythm. Now I don't exactly know what gears you've got on your bike, so I can't really tell if it's if you need to change the front or the back, but an ideal starting point for a gear with a very wide ratio, which will suit pretty much any ability for most sorts of terrain, would be a 34 or a 36 chainring at the front, and at the back you want to look at a minimum of a 28, a 30 or a 32, and that way you should pretty much get over any sort of climb that the terrain should throw at you. But as well as getting your gears dialed, which fundamentally is very important, it's also worth trying to improve on your fitness as well. You'll definitely climb faster if you're fitter, but if you want a little bit of a shortcut, how about watching this video, how to climb faster without getting any fitter.
You're more likely to be able to ride at your optimal power if you're at your optimal cadence. So get yourself a compact chain set combined with a 32 at the rear, and you'll almost always have the optimal gear to use. No matter what the gradient, no more grinding away.
However, what we would suggest is spending around 95% of your time in the saddle, but deliberately getting out of the saddle every so often.
Well, that's it for another edition of Ask GCN Anything. Thanks as ever for all of your questions. We do love reading them, and get in touch using the hashtag talkback down in the comment section or across on social media as well. And if you haven't already subscribed to GCN, you can do so for free by clicking on the globe maybe, and that way you won't miss another one of our videos. Now for 2 more videos that I think you might just like, how about clicking just down here for a bit of motivation, our top 10 motivational quotes. Now winter just a little bit around the corner for many of us, how about clicking just down here for how to keep your hands and feet toasty and warm.